In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I decided long ago when we found out that Scott would be gone and that I would be taking his place for a while, that I knew what I wanted to do. It's much the same as the last time that I filled in for him. I took you to a key verse in Matthew 24, verse 15, which refers to something in Daniel chapter 9 that we'll get to very soon when Scott is back. And I decided that I wanted to go visit the Olivet Discourse again. And so we're going to do that tonight. And when I went and brought up the sermon that I had written when I first taught through the Olivet Discourse, I looked at this sermon, and the first thing that was there was several paragraphs about the shocking, world-changing thing that had just happened. I preached on this the Sunday after 9/11. And actually, I had already done the Olivet Discourse before, but I was going through Matthew, and I did this one message survey, and it was when that just happened. Well, guess what was the anniversary this past Sunday? It was the anniversary of the attack, the 21st anniversary of the attack on New York and the Pentagon on 9/11. So since we come to this message on end times right at that anniversary, I thought it's a good opportunity to hitch our wagon to those events that are fresh in the minds of most of us. There are a few in the room that might be too young to even remember that event or to know its significance. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that and mention a few things to introduce our message. First of all, and this sounds like broken record if you've heard me for very long, doctrine matters. What happened on 9/11 of September 2001 was all about theology. And I said this on Sunday morning. False doctrine and bad theology have terrible consequences. They are always terrible in the eternal consequences, and sometimes in the temporal things as well. The basis for the hatred of America, the basis for the disregard of sanctity of life, which is such a big deal in America right now, the rationale that allows people to do the unspeakably evil things that they've done and call it good and believe that they're serving God, those are religious ideas taken to their logical conclusions. Don't let anyone tell you that it's unimportant to be precise and to be thorough about understanding the doctrines of the Bible. And just remember, 9/11 was theological. A second thing that we want to say as we think about this passage that deals with end times is that those terrible events like September 11th of 2001 are not the events of the end times as recorded in the Olivet Discourse, as predicted in Daniel and elsewhere. They were spectacularly evil. They were the cowardly acts of despicable and evil people who believe false things. They have national and worldwide repercussions for sure. The world has definitely changed since 9/11. Can anyone spell TSA, which didn't exist before that? But the end is definitely nearer than ever before, but the specific prophesied events that precede the return of Jesus Christ have not yet begun. There is nothing else that has to happen before the next event on God's calendar, which is the rapture of the church, and I'll mention that in passing tonight. Let me give you an idea of the difference between something as massive, tragic, and shocking as the events of 9/11 and what it will be like when the wrath of God is poured out. The death toll from September 11th of 2001 at the Pentagon and in New York City, I believe the official death toll was 2,977. And, you know, every year they read the names of all the people who died. I believe it's at the memorial in New York. There were more than 25,000 injured. And then there have been long-term consequences for people like first responders with the poisoning of their respiratory systems and all that. That's terrible. That's a gut punch. We're relatively insulated being here in Idaho, but I'm almost sure there are people in the room here that know somebody or know a family member, know a family that had lost a family member that day. Now, here's the comparison. Revelation chapter 6, verse 8 mentions a time, an event, when a fourth of the population will die. The world population will die. Revelation 9:15 says that later a third of the remaining population will die. That means that in a span of less than 4 years, somewhere between 3 and 4 years, half the population of the world will die. Because if a fourth dies, that leaves 3/4, and if a third of them die, that's another fourth of the original. Half of the world's population is going to die in two events which are the direct result of part of the outpouring of the wrath of God during those times. Those are the two largest events in terms of death, but there will be other deaths as well. So let's think about what that would mean. I think the Earth's population right now is 7.5 billion. Now, 7.5 isn't as easy to do division on as 8. So let's round up and say 8 billion. If the Lord tarries, it won't be very long before there will be 8 billion on Earth. That means that if those things were to happen in our generation, 4 billion people would die. A conservative estimate would say that those are going to happen within a span of 3.5 years. That's an approximation that fits the chronology of the book of Revelation for those events. So if you were to spread that carnage over that entire 3.5 years, now that's not the way it's going to be. It's going to be mainly those two events. But suppose that many people died over a span of 3.5 years. That would be 3,131,115 people who would die in the world every day. That's 130,463 per hour if you averaged it out over that span of 3.5 years. So 9/11, it makes my stomach churn to think about what I was seeing and hearing on that day and those following days. And it's just a tiny, minuscule fraction of what's going to happen when the wrath of God is poured out before the return of Jesus Christ. Now, here's something else to, just in case you were having a good day, I thought I would just see how far I could depress you before we turn the corner here. As you harmonize all of the prophetic passages of the Bible, and Scott's doing a great job leading us through Daniel, and God is very specific about empires and who's going to reign over who, when, and where, and all of that. As you harmonize all the prophetic passages of the Bible, it becomes apparent the United States of America is not mentioned in any end times prophecy. Now, that's a statement of the negative. We know it's not there. And that's in contrast to several human empires which are clearly mentioned, as we've seen and we're going to continue to see in Daniel. So, some people hitch their horse to that idea and ride off into the sunset and say, well, obviously these events are not going to happen until America is rendered completely meaningless or blown off the face of the earth in a nuclear holocaust. And they all kinds of fanciful ideas about that. Well, that does not mean that there's no future for the USA, nor do I in any way predict, assert, or think that given what we are now, that the USA is going to be conquered or that we will become an inconsequential nation. But prophecy commentators have said a lot of things and have erred by speculating on things not revealed by God. But here's my perspective on that. My admonition is this: don't put your faith or attach your faith to your country. Not even a country as wonderful as ours, where we have blessings and have had blessings for 2.5 centuries plus that have never been known anywhere else on this planet since creation. This is a wonderful place, and we've lived in a world where there was sort of an ambient presumption of Christian morality and worldview, sort of a folk Christianity, definitely not always zealously evangelical, but what a wonderful place this is. But I always tell people when I'm teaching them to preach God's word, if I can't preach the same sermon that I preached here when I go to Russia, then I'm not preaching God's word. Because God's word doesn't change for America versus Russia versus China versus Africa versus lonely islands in the South Pacific. It's not a matter of what's going on politically in our country that helps us understand what is happening in the world. Truth and righteousness and freedom are worth defending. And I'm not saying throw up your hands and let go of the reins and don't try to speak up for the unborn or for true righteousness or anything like that. I support the calculated and harshest possible earthly retributions for the cowardly and demonically wicked attacks like 9/11, and there have been many more since then. But if your faith is shaken by political upheavals, even the fall of the United States of America, again, which I'm not predicting, then your faith is misplaced, because we belong to the kingdom of heaven. We've been transferred from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of his dear Son in Jesus Christ. So, okay, enough of recent world history, but I think we have a tendency, probably more than our brothers and sisters in other cultures, to think of as our country goes, that must be God's plan for the kingdom on earth, or something like that, when in fact very few Christians, a very small percentage of Christians, when you could look at all of them from the first century until now, have ever enjoyed the kind of living that we have come to believe is normal. Okay, something could happen bad in America. That doesn't mean Jesus is coming a week from Tuesday. Okay, so let's just keep our perspective there. Now, I want to take you on a tour of 2 chapters of the Bible, Matthew 24 and 25. It's called the Olivet Discourse, because it's a discourse that Jesus gave while they were sitting on the Mount of Olives, hence Olivet Discourse. And I love the olives in the salad tonight too. That was really good, and nothing to do with the Olivet Discourse. All right, I want you to look at these 2 chapters, and when I have preached through the Olivet Discourse, I spent 12 sermons on it. I'm going to do it all in one overview tonight, because the way I've always described it, and I said this to you some months ago when I had a chance to stand here in Scott's stead, the Olivet Discourse is like the the connection box through which all the wires of prophecy from Old Testament through New Testament and on to the end times, they all connect through the Olivet Discourse. At least you can think of it that way, and you won't be far off. So here's how I would outline it. An overview of the end is the first 28 verses. The second coming of Christ is described in chapter 24, verses 29 through 51. And then chapter 25, all of it is about preparation and judgment. So it starts with this overview of the end. And you need to understand what this great discourse is about. It's the second longest of any of the single event discourses given by Jesus. The longest, of course, is the Sermon on the Mount. This is the second longest. When you realize when Jesus spoke this, and especially when you realize what was on the minds of his disciples, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand, even though we can't peruse all its details. But look at the beginning of this so that we can set the stage. This is now probably Tuesday night of the week that Jesus was crucified on Friday. The triumphal entry has happened. He's been in the temple for a day. He's cleared the temple for the second time. He did it earlier in his ministry as well. He's been teaching in the temple all day. There's been confrontations with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians. But now it's evening. Matthew 24, verses 1 through 3. And Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he answered and said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly, I say to you, not one stone here shall be left upon another, which will not be torn down." And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, in other words, out of the public eye where they'd been all afternoon. They were saying, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? Now, if you've not been to Israel yet, next May, you can go with me, and we'll stand on the Mount of Olives, and you'll have a chance to look right straight down on where the temple was. The temple was so prominent, you would see it from anywhere in Jerusalem, but as you leave Jerusalem, you go to the east, you go down this steep valley, the valley of Kidron, you come up the other side, and it's the Mount of Olives, which rises to a higher point than any place in Jerusalem. It's the most spectacular view, and if we'll show you pictures of the temple and what it was like. It's always spectacular to see. Right now, that's where the famous mosque is, and you see this big golden dome there, and you can picture what it might have been like with the temple. Now, from Luke 21, verses 5 through 7, we learn that there was more to this discussion than merely pointing out the temple and Jesus saying something interesting about it. He'd cleared the temple the day before. He'd made a big stir there. And perhaps on the mind of the disciples was the contrast between the spectacular beauty of the temple and the incongruous ugliness of the false religion and the scripture twisting of the Pharisees. The people that should have welcomed Jesus as their Savior were arguing with him all day long in the temple. So Luke 21, 5 through 7 says, this is a parallel passage, same time, "And while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, 'As for these things which you're looking at, the days will come in which there will be not one stone left upon another, which will not be torn down.' And they questioned him, saying, 'Teacher, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?'" So you back up a few days from that, and we know that as Jesus approached Jerusalem, and it was going to be his last time there, he was coming to the cross, and he knew that. They were making their way up from Jericho, down by the Jordan River, and you make this climb up a winding road. The new highway is awesome compared to the old winding road. That's where the story of the Good Samaritan happens, the inn that was along that road. It was a great place for people to be ambushed and robbed and all of that. But Jesus led the whole group up that, and it was that long winding path. You climb about roughly 4,000 feet in elevation. It's most usually a two-day trip. As they were on their way, Jesus was teaching the 12 and all the others that came with them. Luke 19:11 tells us, while they were listening to these things, the things Jesus was teaching, he went on to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and here's the key thing, they supposed that the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. They knew Jesus was the Messiah. They knew he was coming to Jerusalem. They believed they were coming to a coronation. That's what their expectation was. So what the disciples meant by saying, "You're coming," when they asked about the sign of your coming and the end of the ages, what's the party going to be like, Jesus? We know we're coming to the seat of the kingdom, and you're the king. This is fantastic. Wow, bring it on. Then Jesus further disturbed or stirred their thinking. I think he disturbed it too. He stirred their thinking about the future of Jerusalem and of Judaism with something else that he said before the triumphal entry. That's in Luke 19:41-44. When he approached, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, "If you had known this day, even you, the things which make for peace," which means the Prince of Peace, if you had welcomed him, "but now they have been hidden from your eyes. For the day shall come upon you when your enemies will throw up a bank before you and surround you and hem you in on every side." That's describing a siege. "And they will level you to the ground, and your children with you, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation." That was a prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, which took place in AD 70, so about 37 years after this. Then he's come to Jerusalem. Oh, the arrival was fantastic. Hosanna. They shouted, they sang, it was wonderful. But since the triumphal entry, Jesus had said a number of things that are reflected in this question from the disciples. When they said, "When will these things be?" they had specific things in mind that Jesus had been talking about. And when they added, "And what will be the sign of your coming?" it means, when's this destruction going to happen, and when's the party that you get to be the king, and we're going to reign with you in your kingdom? They were expecting all these things to be rolled together into the next few days. They thought this was right about to happen. So they perceived the destruction of the temple, the end times scenario for the nation of Israel, and the coming of Jesus as the king to set up his kingdom, that all these things were going to happen very soon. Now, if you skim back with me just a little bit to the previous chapter, and yeah, I will get to Matthew 24, I promise. Here are some of the things that the question refers to. Matthew 23, verse 36. "Truly I say to you, all these things shall come upon this generation." Now, what was the context of that? Oh, we talked about that another time, and we will another time. Verse 38 and 39. "Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on you shall not see me until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Now, the disciples couldn't possibly have grasped all that it meant. But Jesus clearly told them, your house is being left desolate. What house? The house of Israel. You're being abandoned. He had predicted it earlier. They were going to be left desolate. And he had said some days earlier, Matthew 21:43, "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation producing the fruit of it." I'm sure they were baffled by that. But they're saying, well, okay, there's some new people come to the party. As long as you're the king and we're reigning with you and the kingdom is here, it's okay with us. They couldn't possibly have grasped that, and they certainly didn't. Now, a couple of other big picture perspectives will help you sort out why the Olivet Discourse is so significant. One of those perspectives is that even after his death and resurrection, Jesus' followers still expected his return and the arrival of the kingdom of heaven to be very soon. They were devastated when Jesus was taken to the cross. They scattered. They hid. They were crushed. And oh, what a glorious thing when he rose from the dead. Oh, the plan's back on. This is great. Wow. Sounds like there's going to be a big mess in Jerusalem, but the kingdom is here. Well, Jesus ascended to the Father not terribly long after that. And just before he ascended, Acts chapter 1, verse 6 says, "And so when they had come together, they were asking him," and this is a very honest question, "Lord, is it at this time that you are restoring the kingdom to Israel?" Oh, Jesus, we get it. You're the king. The kingdom is coming. We can't wait. And we've been so patient. We waited that whole week. And then you died. And praise God, you rose again. And we've had 40 days now. We've seen you risen from the dead a bunch of times. Oh, Lord, is it now? At last? Just as you and I would have been asking if we were there and if we believed. But the other big picture item you need to keep in mind is that they were incorrect in their expectation. It wasn't unbelief. They just didn't know yet. The next two verses. He said to them, "It is not for you to know the times or epochs which the Father has fixed by his own authority." And he used these words, times and epochs. Oh, that sounds like a long time. And that was not what they wanted to hear. Then they heard these famous words, "But you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and even to the remotest part of the earth." That was still really hard for them to grasp. But further revelation, the rest of the New Testament, makes it clear that the time between the first coming and the second coming was going to be a long time of a lot of missionary activity, not only among Jews, but also Samaritans. Ooh, they have spiritual cooties. We don't want them in on our party. Well, that was going to be a big deal to wrap their arms around that. And then Gentiles, the remotest part of the earth, and yet God was still going to fulfill all of his promises to Israel. I can't help but slip this in. Romans 11, 25 and 26 comments on the kingdom is going to be taken away from you and given to a nation producing the fruit of it. Paul writes, "For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, something not revealed in the Old Testament, now made known in the New Testament, lest you be wise in your own estimation that a partial hardening has happened." I mean, not all of Israel. There have always been believers among the Jews. A partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and thus all Israel will be saved. Guys, it's coming, but it's not on the timetable that you thought it was going to be. Now, what we have in the Olivet Discourse is Jesus explaining to his disciples for the first time, very important truth that would be undergirded and fleshed out by later New Testament revelation. He wanted them to know that there would be specific things in the future that would happen between God and Israel. Every promise that God has made to Israel is going to be fulfilled. It's going to happen just prior to and immediately following his second coming. And Jesus also emphasized that many of these things were prophesied earlier. And the main one through whom it was written is Daniel. That's why it's so fruitful to study the book of Daniel. Another consideration for you to keep in mind, and I'm trying to kind of plant some seeds that are going to get watered in the coming months as you work through Daniel. But another consideration is that the book of Revelation, which details events of that time right before Jesus returns, it describes the second coming in more detail than the Olivet Discourse. Revelation 19 has a more detailed description of the second coming than the one we're going to see in a few minutes. And it was not written until more than 60 years after Jesus ascended, and about 25 years after that destruction of Jerusalem. So this time frame that was in the minds of the disciples when they asked these questions was woefully short of what it was actually going to be. And Revelation 19 and 20 together make it very clear that the second coming and the millennial kingdom, when Jesus does reign on earth for 1,000 years, it's still future. All right, are you ready? Let's dive into Matthew 24 and 25. In 24:4 through 28, Jesus describes an overview of the final 7 years before he returns. If you haven't caught on yet, 7 years is going to be really significant as a period of time. And you're going to be introduced to it very soon in Daniel chapter 9. They're predicted specifically in Daniel 9:24 through 27. So stay tuned. Don't miss a week, or you might miss the second coming. There will be a lot of things during those 7 years going on at once. Israel is going to be at the center stage of world events. And from what Jesus says in chapter 24, verse 15, about the abomination of desolation, what I preached on some months ago, we know that, that's connected, by the way, to Daniel 9 specifically. We know that a world political leader, we usually call him by the name Antichrist or the Antichrist. He is going to show up on the scene. He's going to make a treaty with Israel, promising to protect her and guarantee their safety in the land and in Jerusalem for 7 years. And they're going to be able to rebuild a temple during that time. He's going to break that treaty, that 7-year treaty, at the halfway point. And he's going to install himself as the object of worship in the new temple of Israel. It's such an abominable thing, desecrating the temple, hence the terminology, the abomination of desolation. But during those times, during those 7 years, despite the work of the Antichrist, very sinister to begin with, and then very evil as he is unmasked, during those days, many are going to come along and claim that they're the Messiah. Also during those days, there will be unprecedented calamities, those things that are going to make the terrorist attacks on 9/11 seem like nothing. And it's going to include the famous terms earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars. It'll be a time of tribulation such as the world has never known. You've heard of the times of the bubonic plague in Europe. Oh, how awful. How awful has it been for people under Idi Amin, Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler? How bad is it for Ukraine in the last 7 months. Horrible, horrible things. There's going to be things that make those pale in comparison, because this will include not only the evil that mankind is capable of, not only the evil of the Antichrist, but the wrath of God is going to be being poured out during that time. Lots of detail in Revelation 6 through 18. What was it now? About 4 years ago, we muddled our way through the book of Revelation on Wednesday nights. You might want to go review some of that if you haven't had enough yet. And not mentioned anywhere in the Olivet Discourse, but described in the New Testament, is the next event on God's calendar, what I alluded to earlier. It's in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18, 1 Corinthians 15:52, John 14:3. That's the rapture of the church. That is the moment when all living, true disciples of Jesus Christ will be removed from the earth, and I love this phrase, in a moment. How long is a moment? In the twinkling of an eye. How long does it take you to twinkle? That's just a way of saying it like this. Every living child of God snatched away from the earth. Wow. For reasons we don't have time to explore today, I believe quite firmly that the rapture will take place prior to the emergence of the Antichrist. And I further believe that it is the removal of the righteous influence of Christians in the world, along with the chaos that will be caused by the rapture itself. All of a sudden, multiplied millions of people vanish, and you can't even have a funeral. They didn't die. No body. I mean, literally, no body. They're gone. And I think in the chaos of all of that, I think that's the circumstance that is going to allow someone who is clever, demonically clever, will be able to manipulate the situation to assume unprecedented power over the world. Hey, look, we had a microscopic virus get loose. 2.5 years ago? Do you realize, I've been alive for, 7 decades plus. I have never seen a time that anything brought such unanimous idiocy to the whole world all at once. Oh, some people are sick. Let's shut down everything. And it wasn't just here. It wasn't just in our state. It wasn't just in our country. The whole world did it. One little virus. It didn't turn out to be even anywhere near as bad as the virus from 104 years ago in 1918, the so-called Spanish virus, Spanish flu. But you get the idea? A crisis is when people will give up their autonomy, their freedom. They'll panic. I like the term for what we had in these last couple of years. It was a panicdemic. I'm not minimizing that people died. A serious case of COVID was a serious case of COVID, and people in families from Heritage Bible Church were lost. I'm not minimizing that. I'm just making the point. I think that's how the Antichrist is going to seize his power. So, Matthew 24, 19 through 21. And by the way, the world is going to be a terrible place to be in those 7 years. Remember that 130,000 people on the average dying per hour worldwide. Matthew 24, verses 19 and 21. Hey, we're in Matthew 24. Isn't that cool? Jesus says, "But woe to those who are with child and to those who nurse babes in those days. But pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on a Sabbath For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. Now, this is very Israel-centric, hence the reference to the Sabbath and the flight and all that. But understand, worse than anything that's ever happened. You might say worse than every bad thing that's ever happened, all rolled together. Now, there is only one way to make sure that you're going to be spared from the wrath of God. That is to make sure that you trust Jesus Christ now. And there will be people who won't trust Christ before the rapture. And there's going to be this unprecedented evangelism worldwide. People are going to be coming to Christ faster in greater numbers than ever before, at the same time that people are dying at the hands of the Antichrist, and many of them dying under the wrath of God. Now, the focal point of the end times is the same as the focal point of the Olivet Discourse, which is the same as the focal point of the book of Revelation. What is that focal point? It is point number 2 of our outline, the second coming. During those 7 years that lead up to the second coming, we call them the tribulation, there will be unprecedented evangelism and unprecedented judgment going along simultaneously. So at the return of Christ, there's going to be a great gathering of believers who will then enter into the kingdom of heaven on earth as the only inhabitants of the earth at that time. Now remember, however many people are taken out at the rapture, that leaves you with a beginning population of the tribulation. Half of them are going to die. A whole bunch of them are going to come to faith in Christ, and they're going to welcome Jesus when he returns. Unbelievers, when Jesus returns, are going to be taken away to judgment. Now here's the actual return as described in Matthew 24, 19 through 20, or 29 through 31. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, at the end of those 7 years, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. I love this. You know how when you go to a play, some kind of special performance, and everybody's talking, and then slowly the lights come down, and the room goes completely dark, and then a spotlight comes on, and somebody comes on to perform however they're going to be. God's going to turn off all the lights in the universe momentarily. Can I tell you the physics of the powers of the heavens shaken? No. But look at this. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And now people have taken off on that. Well, what's the sign of the Son of Man? That's the sign of Jesus. It's going to be a giant cross that shows up in the sky. No, it's not. It's going to be Jesus in his glory, which is indescribable brilliance of light among countless other phenomena. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. All those people who rejected him, who followed the Antichrist, Jesus shows up, and there's going to be a collective, oh no. They're going to be mourning that they were wrong. Look at this. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect. Those are the ones who believed during those 7 years. Gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. And then, having announced that that's what it's going to be like when he comes back, Jesus gives several illustrations, the rest of chapter 24, explaining how you need to be ready. And there's a recurring theme. Matthew 24, verse 36, but of that day and hour, no one knows. Not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. When Jesus had not yet ascended to the Father, he didn't know what day that was going to be. Is that amazing? That he humbled himself and actually abdicated elements of his omniscience. And it's interesting when you get into the book of Revelation later on, it doesn't say no longer that he doesn't know. That's just an interesting sidelight. Matthew 24, verses 42 to 44. Therefore, be on the alert. Name all your kids Gregory, because that comes from the Greek word for alert, especially if you don't want your babies to sleep. Name them Gregory. Be on the alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you be ready too. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. Be ready. There's this overview of the time of the end that leads up to the second coming. It's the first 18 verses of Matthew 24. There's the description, or first 28, I should say. There's the second coming itself, and a few parables after it, 24, 29 to 51. And then chapter 25, when you compare it to the rest of the Olivet Discourse, it's a lot easier to understand. It's not a whole bunch of details. It's not a whole bunch of connections to specific prophecies that are all tugged together there. Chapter 25 has just three main paragraphs. 25, 1 through 13, deals with the future of the unprepared. Remember the story of the virgins awaiting the bridal feast? Half of them prepared, half of them not prepared. The lesson is clear. 25:13. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day of the hour. Then there's chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. That's the parable of the talents. And that doesn't mean my talent is tap dancing and yours is playing the fiddle or whatever. A talent is a weight, a measure of silver or gold. It's a study of stewardship, if you will. The parable of the talents is a great warning that all of mankind is going to fall into one of two categories when the king comes. You're either going to be a good and faithful servant, or you're going to be a wicked and lazy servant. And it too ends with a powerful, sobering warning. Chapter 25, verse 30. And cast out that worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus comes. There are those that have believed. There are those who have not believed. They're going to be separated. That's the destiny of the ones who are not believing. And then chapter 25, verses 31 to 46 is the description of the judgment at the time of Christ's return. This is the famous sheep and goats judgment. In this judgment, all who are alive on the earth at that time are going to be separated into two groups. We already saw he's going to send his angels to gather his people from the four winds, while other angels are going to gather all the others. Believers are pictured as sheep. Unbelievers are described as goats. And this section's final words is yet another warning. Matthew 25, verse 46. And these, the goats, will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Now we're studying all this. And God is still alive and well, and there are still miracles like, I'm done, and there's another minute and a half left. I want you to get this big picture there. Scott's going to fill in a lot of connective tissue to these data points along the way that I have given to you. But the whole point is, be ready. Know what God's word says. Be ready. You don't know A friend of mine said the other day that his son asked him to spell the word, how to spell the word wrong. He gave him a hint, and he told his son to go look it up in the dictionary. Son came back to him a few minutes later with the dictionary open. He found it, W-R-O-N-G, figured out the silent W thing. And then he said, Dad, who's this man whose picture is next to the word wrong? He said, oh, that's Hal Lindsey, who is a famous evangelical false prophet of 60 years ago. He wrote a book taking this scenario, and he did a screwball interpretation of a couple of arbitrary takes that are slight possibilities of could be, maybes, what ifs. And he wrote a book that basically said that the rapture had to happen no later than the fall of 1988, which meant the tribulation had to happen no later than the fall of 1981, which meant, he was wrong. Dead wrong. With the same Bible we have and the same data points that we have, the point is, no one knows the day of the hour. When somebody tells you the date, you have a false teacher on your hands. Get yourself away. If you have a chance to expose them, expose them. They're wrong. They're dead wrong. Jesus could come before we are out the door tonight and take his entire church to be with him in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. And it might not happen until my great-grandchildren are preaching the gospel somewhere. No one knows the day or the hour. Don't sit around trying to figure out the time of the end times events. You're going to be wrong. Learn the lesson. Be ready. And the important issue, the crucial issue above everything else is, are you ready right now to die? It doesn't have to be the rapture. It could be an aneurysm that doesn't let you get out the door tonight. Are you ready to face God? Or are you ready for the end of the world to come? Are you ready for these horrible things to begin? Are you looking forward to the coming of the Lord? Do you want more than anything else to see him face to face? Don't put it off. We're not here just to learn prophecy charts and just to memorize Bible verses and just to be able to win arguments against people that have different views about how all these end times things are going to happen. It's all about you be ready. Be ready. Let's pray. Father, there is only one way that any of us, are ready, can be ready, could ever be ready, and that is to be standing in your grace, clothed in the righteousness of your Son, Jesus Christ, blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in him. Oh, Father, stir up in us the excitement, the motivation to proclaim this good news. There are people we love, Father, who aren't in Christ. Please use us to speak the truth in love, and we pray that their hearts might be opened and they could stand complete in him. And as your word says, even so, come, Lord Jesus.